I want to welcome the members, staff, and guests to the July meeting of the Dormitory Authority. As I was going to the train station this morning, a guy who sounded like he might have, in another life, been the town crier, was screaming at the top of the steps, "It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood." You can't make this stuff up.
He asked to be your neighbor?
No, he did not. And as proof of that, if you're not looking out that window, turn around and look out that window, because the difference between yesterday and today is the difference between night and day. It's a glorious day in New York City.
It was as I predicted yesterday at our finance committee.
Yes, you did. You did predict that.
When I sat on that view, finally,
Yeah, right.
it was just completely
There was nothing there.
foggy. You could see out the window.
There was nothing there. I want to welcome our newest board member, Wellington Chen. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Long time coming.
We all know that. We all know how that works. It's in case you all hadn't figured this out, with Wellington Chen's presence on the board, we are now at a full complement of 11, which is the first time that has happened in a very long time. And I think it goes without saying that it gives us a great deal more diversity of thought to have different folks sitting at this table. And I'm looking forward to your contributions, Wellington, to this meeting.
Mr. Chair, may I
Sir.
just say that we have had the opportunity, Mike Cusack, our General Counsel, Debbie Drescher, our Deputy General Counsel, and myself have had the opportunity to sit down and welcome Mr. Chen and walk him through the board process as well as other issues that we have been discussing over the last year. So I just wanted to have that reflected for the record. Thank you.
I also want to welcome, as a permanent designee, at least the full-time designee to the table, Tracy Raleigh. You all have seen Tracy here before. She has shared her thoughts, her healthcare thoughts and healthcare financing thoughts with this board on several occasions in the past. We are pleased to have you, and I think we're fortunate to have you. In welcoming you, it's important, I think, that I say that we lost Charlie Abel. Charlie is going on to another part of his life. Ultimately, he hasn't done that yet. And as I said in the Finance Committee meeting yesterday, Charlie's contributions to the way we have thought about some of the healthcare financings were just enormous. They've been favorably received. The way that he thinks about issues and the way he presents issues, often in tandem, they're a tag team with Larry Volk on the other end of the table. It has been a real pleasure to have Charlie and to be able to depend on Charlie as the health department's designee. I don't want to embarrass him when he looks at this streaming video. I'm sure he can't wait to see it. But he has been a very valuable member of this board, and his contributions will be missed as we come to appreciate your contributions, Tracy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
With that, I think we can actually start the meeting. Forgive me for going on and on. You all have had a chance. We have two sets of minutes to approve, and I'd like to do that separately. First, the minutes of the April 24, 2018 board meeting. You've had a chance to take a look at them. You received them in the mail. They did not come with your board book. Are there any suggested changes or revisions for those minutes? Hearing none, then, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes? John Gardner, thank you. Is there a second? Gerard, thank you. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Then the motion will carry unanimously. We also have the minutes of the June 20 board meeting. Those also were mailed to you or arrived electronically. You all have had a chance to review those minutes. Are there any revisions coming from other members? Hearing none, I have one to offer. It is on page 2 of the minutes. under the subheading Finance Committee Report, line 2, which begins day, comma, and after discussion decided unanimously to recommend B, I would insert the word revised. Mind if you're a medical center obligated to do transactions of board for does anybody object? As you would recall, we actually had a presentation first to the Finance Committee and then the board of a revised credit summary for my view. And I thought that the minutes should reflect it. All right, with that addition, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes? John Gardner, thank you again. Is there a second? George, thank you very much. All in favor? Who's at the gate with aye? Aye. We will then go on to we will now go on to the Finance Committee report. Chairman Romsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We met yesterday afternoon. We adopted the meeting minutes from the May meeting as well as the June meeting with that minor amendment. We then proceeded to advance in a pretty extensive discussion regarding the matter that's before this board today, which is the amendment to the financing guidelines. And after a good discussion, I think, Mr. Chair, we recommend that they be approved at today's board meeting, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for Jerry? Hearing none. Mr. Craig.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Clear day.
By the way, I should also note that we also thank Charlie for his
yes.
his service.
Yes. Thank you.
Sitting on the Finance Committee. We wished him the best.
If I can just remind everyone, we have Elwise Noset here, our photographer, and we're going to be doing headshots for every board member to be placed in the annual report, as well as the staff, whoever would like to have their headshots updated. And then we will take a board picture, board and staff picture, etc. So, we all put on our best, as I recall, and make sure that we talk to people. But Elwise is going to be taking pictures periodically just to really reflect the interaction and the work that we do. So I just wanted to continue to make you aware of that. Thank you. We continue to have a very strong year. DASNY finished the first half of calendar 2018 very competitively and was cited once again by the bond buyer and lawyers as one of the most prolific issuers in the nation. DASNY delivered to the market issuances totaling $3.2 billion. This includes the $325.2 million for Columbia University to fund the design, construction, and renovation of science and healthcare facilities, as well as the $593 million for NYU for arts, education, advanced medical research, sports, recreation, and student housing facilities. DASNY also sold $585.2 million on behalf of 56 New York State school districts. The Series 2018 bonds issued in 5 series was the largest pooled school district issue in DASNY's history. Very successful first half of the year. We'll highlight again the annual report. We're taking pictures to really reflect our most recent vintage as opposed to what we've had for a number of years. This year's report describes how our One DASNY initiative has enhanced project delivery and expanded service offerings, enabling us to swiftly and expertly respond to our clients' rapidly changing needs. Our efforts are working. For example, we developed a new design-build contract and are using it for a $24 million residence hall at the College of Brockport. Last year this time, there was a hole in the ground at Brockport. This year, I've gone up, knocked on the door, shook hands with the president. Steve just recently went up and came back. The project is going to be completed this week, if not this week, next week. It's huge in terms of the transformation for our delivery model. So we anticipate this will serve for other design-build projects that we are seeking to execute for SUNY campuses In fact, there are going to be 2 additional design build projects set to begin. One is SUNY Polytechnic in Utica, and the other is the $750 million New York State Life Sciences Public Health Laboratory in the Capital Region, which we are collaborating with the Department of Health on. So I will provide additional information regarding the latter in a few minutes. As it relates in the annual report, we completed 21 bond financings totaling approximately $8.5 billion. Building on a foundation of diversity and inclusion, DASNY is also supporting economic growth and ensuring a stronger, more vibrant New York for decades to come. In particular, the specifics of the New York State Department of Health and the Empire State Development Corporation, we also issued a request for qualifications seeking qualified design-build entities or teams capable of designing and constructing a new multi-purpose New York State Life Sciences Public Health Laboratory. Again, the total budget for this project is $750 million. Pursuant to the New York State Infrastructure Investment Act, DASNY is authorized to use design-build for the Life Sciences Laboratory. The new Life Sciences Laboratory will be located in the Capital Region, and it will better foster innovation and collaboration within DOH's Wadsworth Center, as well as between the Wadsworth Center and outside partners, thereby contributing to New York State's broader life sciences initiative in the Capital Region. We'd also like to welcome Cressida Tate, a graduate of Medgar Evers College, and Dilshota Kurbanova, a graduate of Baruch College's Zicklin School of Business. They joined DASNY on July 9th as our first Public Finance Diversity Fellows. They are serving as Public Finance Analysts at DASNY's Albany headquarters. Again, the fellowship is a full-year position for graduating college students running through June 30th, 2019. The fellows will spend 6 months at DASNY and then 6 months at one of our investment banking partners. Cressida will be working with RBC Capital Markets. Dilshota will be working with Barclays Capital. The investment banking partners were chosen by lottery under the supervision of DASNY's auditing partner, KPMG. As you may recall, we worked diligently with our senior underwriters to effectuate this extraordinary opportunity. The fellowship is an important step to help building a financial services industry that reflects the people it serves, as well as create and strengthen opportunities to advance diversity and inclusion within our workforce. I'd like for our interns to stand up. Be recognized, please. Thank you again. On June 28th, Governor Andrew Cuomo announced more than $67 million in grants for capital projects at 39 colleges and universities across New York. The funding comes from the Higher Education Capital Matching Grant Program, HECAP, and is awarded by the HECAP Board, which provides matching grants to private and not-for-profit colleges and universities for capital projects, which enhance the programmatic offerings and student life at the college and provide economic development benefit to the surrounding areas of the college. And then finally, last 2 things, finance. Healthcare Reform Act reserves decreased by $4.1 million due primarily to disbursements to St. John's Episcopal Hospital totaling $6.2 million. This was partially offset by $2.1 million in receipts, including $1 million from St. James Mercy Hospital, $500,000 from Brookdale Hospital, and $0.6 million from 9 other institutions. Now, DASNY's personnel expenses were slightly over budget, primarily due to the implementation of the New York State Budget Bulletin regarding salaries for management confidential employees. With that said, DASNY's total expenditures are slightly under budget, which is primarily due to the timing of anticipated non-personnel expenses. There are a number of upcoming events that I will participate in. One that stands out is I will have the honor of being the inaugural recipient of the Dr. Roscoe C. Brown Leadership Award at the 100 Black Men of New York Awards dinner in New York City. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. As to that award, let me say that in my view is quite an honor and speaks significantly to what you represent to that group in New York State and in New York City. Dr. Roscoe Brown was a very dear personal friend, an education icon, president of CUNY's Bronx Community College, a member of the Tuskegee Airmen from World War II, a man who was revered in many, many circles in this nation. He was hired as a consultant, actually, and paid a lot of money to advise the crew in the production of the movie Red Tails, and in which he was depicted, not by name. He was a very special friend, but he was also a very special man. Ran the New York City Marathon until he was 80.
Wow.
An amazing man. In any event, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
As well as on all the other recognition that you're getting. Let me say that this is a very unusual meeting, as you all know. There are no financing fees presented today because we are considering work that has taken more than 2 years to produce. With the help of our legal counsel, your memo is included in the packet, and with the help of consultants with whom we have worked for a long period of time, we have begun to fashion what I believe will be what DASNY intends to be and needs to be going into the future. What the work here is, and it's an overused word, the work here has been transformation. We've learned a lot about ourselves. We've learned a lot about what we do and what we don't do. We know what we do well and what we don't do well as a result of the work that staff and outside folk have helped us to get done. The proposed financing guidelines that you're going to look at today have been wordsmithed more than any other document I think I've ever worked on. And we have to thank for that the legal department. Thank you very much, Michael, and your staff. We also have to thank for that Squire. Thank you all very much. Robin is here today. She's from California. She works in the California office of that firm. She happened to be in New York, and she's here today to see what decisions this board makes with regard to the guidelines. A special thanks to our former General Counsel, Jeff Pohl, whose wordsmithing and crafting turned these guidelines into what you have in front of you now. Jeff was a very dear colleague when he was here, and he remains a colleague now as outside counsel. And to the other two, Sonny and also Chris, thank you all very much for your contributions to what we are about to consider. I think this board is ready to do this, and I've got my fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. With that said, how do you want to proceed?
I'll just make a few opening comments, and I'd like to reflect the work that has been done internally and across DASNY. So we are pleased to share with you the most comprehensive review of our processes and guidelines. This is largely a product of many collaborations. It includes our discussions with you, advisory insights from EY, Squire Patton, and the market sounding across New York State with our private client partners in higher education and health. You have black-lined and clean versions of the finance guidelines to illuminate the changes we present. The memo from me outlines more than, I'll say, actually 2-year-long process of our financing guidelines, and it is one part of the larger initiative, One DASNY, we have commenced. across our entire organization. The execution of our mission is important, and we propose the following areas of improvement that we believe will help us: competitively and thoughtfully growing our private client business, develop more efficiencies in our process and execution, build appropriate and strong risk management culture and processes. This is and has been a bottom-up process of collaboration with working teams across public finance, legal, and procurement. We have benefited from the work and insights of our DASNY team across numerous businesses. They have worked effortlessly to strengthen New York State's presence and as the major financer of private infrastructure through our partnerships with nonprofit higher education and healthcare institutions across New York State. Our work in the private client infrastructure space, coupled with our work in the public infrastructure space for New York State's public higher education and healthcare institutions, is critical to New York State's ability to attract talent, support innovation, diversity and inclusion, and grow its economy. We owe thanks to many people, and certainly thanks go to each of you in terms of your partnership and leadership in giving us perspectives and insights. Mr. Chair, we thank you for your leadership on this. This was not simple. It was not easy. We had to do a lot of discussion on it, but I think everyone was listened to. And I would just like to especially thank Portia Lee for her role in terms of navigating us through this process, Mike Cusack for his role in helping us navigate this. Both were very integral day in and day out for a number of weeks with the board as well as with the overall organization. Thank Mike Corrigan in terms of his knowledge and support on this, Kim Nadell, Paul Koopman, Andy Purcell, Debbie Drescher, Dan Petroff, Deborah Fasser, Carolyn Griffith, and we've got over 30 other people. And if you give me permission after, I'll do that.
All right.
But the committees are important. We had closing and document committee, staff report and board process, financing process, and key bottlenecks, credit issues, post-issuance compliance, and bond administration. So again, I want to reaffirm that this was a bottom-up process. This was collaborative. Everyone had a voice and perspective in advancing this. And so we're very excited to have this come before the board. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. This is where we turn the meeting over to Portia.
Yes.
Portia, you're going to lead the discussion?
Okay.
Thank
Thank you very much. Behind tab 3 is both Alan Gerard had mentioned. There's a cover memo for the financing guidelines, the proposed revisions, and then both clean and black line versions of the financing guidelines. I would also note that on the table before the members is another draft of the clean and black line guidelines. You'll see in the black line guidelines there's actually in yellow markings where these guidelines have been changed from the version that you received in your board books. The changes are really either formatting changes or non-substantive drafting changes, just to make the drafting cleaner than you had received previously. But there's a substantive change. And again, the black line version does have the 3 places highlighted in yellow, so you can see what that is. As we've discussed and as the board knows, our financing guidelines our current financing guidelines are set up so that we can really address the entire credit spectrum. We've got investment grade and then below investment grade and non-rated. For the below investment grade and non-rated, the avenue forward there was really private placements. The changes before you today really have to do only with the investment guidelines as they relate to investment grade credits. As you know, the current approach that we take in our financing guidelines is to basically look by sector and by rating category and establish various security provisions in that manner, by sector and by rating category. Anytime that we've considered changes in the past to our financing guidelines, and we have done that periodically through the years. We basically have taken a step back, tried to survey the market, and really understand what it is and what it is that the market is looking for. And when I say that, I mean really, the investors, what they're really looking for in the sectors in which we work. And based on that kind of review, we have come back and we've made changes to the financing guidelines. What you have before you today for, again, investment grade credits is an approach that says, it I guess restates what we always know in terms of these financings, but it certainly bears saying here. That's that the loan agreement is a general obligation of the institution. Bonds are limited obligations of the authority, and that all financing documents would contain the appropriate standard provisions for issuance. But that the documents may also include, and this is the new approach here, that the documents may also include certain security provisions that are based on market conditions and practices. I think we are all accustomed to seeing in our financing guidelines various elements of security, be it a pledge of revenues, financial covenants, mortgage, debt service reserve fund, in some form and fashion, in some combination. We have seen those things and those requirements in our guidelines, again, by sector and by rating category. What we're saying here is the approach we'd like to take is really one that's more based on existing and current market conditions and practices, so that we are able to really be as timely and current in our approach as the market is. I would say that, this really, in some respects, doesn't really differ so much from what we have done in the past when we've seen that the market has moved, and our guidelines haven't quite kept up with that. As you'll recall, there were a number, really numerous instances where we came before the board and we sought exceptions from our guidelines, particularly with respect to debt service reserve funds. And when we would come to the board and have that discussion, we would basically note that, this is what we were seeing in the market. We would give examples of other transactions, similarly situated credits in terms of sector and rating category, and have that discussion, based on that information, which really provided to us by the underwriter working together with the borrower, and really the underwriter's assessment of really what the investors are looking for. So, that's the approach that we had taken in the past when we looked at exceptions. So I think what we're saying now is we wanted to take a step back and kind of look at the process overall. And really what we're saying is we would like to take that kind of market-based approach with all of the financings that we are undertaking, because that would allow us the opportunity to really be current, and more than that, I think to really provide certainty to the borrowers that we work with. Oftentimes having a more prescriptive set of guidelines has resulted in a situation where it's caused questions from the borrowers in terms of, would they really be able to move forward? As much as we can say as staff, that there was always the exception process. I think it does leave the borrowers with some feeling of unease, because also as staff, in as much as I could always say we have done things like this in the past, staff can't give firm assurances as to ultimately what the board would decide. We really don't like to get out over our skis as far as those kinds of matters obviously are concerned. So to have guidelines that sort of take away that element of uncertainty would be tremendously helpful to us as we move forward. We have through the years made various changes to the guidelines, and this I think is the next step in that evolution. One of the things that I would also note is that to the extent that we're talking about, providing those kinds of examples to the board, to demonstrate what I think we are looking at when we see the words, based on market conditions and practices, and those are the words that are here in the guidelines. One thing that I would note is what we're really talking about doing is providing those kinds of examples in the areas where our current guidelines are prescriptive in terms of the security requirements. So for example, if you are a AAA higher ed institution, and actually it goes down into the A category as well. Right now, our guidelines say you can just move forward with a general obligation. So I don't think we're talking about coming back and saying, here are other examples of AAA rated higher ed institutions. So really what you're talking about is, in the case of higher ed, it's really in the BBB space, and you can see that it's messy, but you can see it in the black line guidelines. I mean, that's really the space that we're talking about, where it's, where the guidelines are prescriptive in terms of the various security provisions, and also really in the healthcare sector. And you'll see that also in the revised guidelines. I guess a couple of things that I would note that were also in the memo. If things were to change after we present to the board, and this is really, if things were to change and you ended up having less security, then we would certainly come back to the board, and the board would need to take action on that. If things changed and there was more security, then we would come back to the board in an informational sense and update you so that you're aware of what had changed in a particular transaction. I think, one good example of that actually, and I had intended to update the board in my report, but I would say it here. As you all know, we looked at and you took action on the Montefiore transaction last month. When we had presented to you, we told you that we expected ratings in the BBB category. They did end up getting ratings BBB from S&P, Baa2 from Moody's. And the way in which we presented that transaction to you in the staff report, we had indicated that we would get a mortgage if the transaction would have a mortgage if required by investors. The bond counsel letter also made clear that there may or may not be a mortgage. We'd had that discussion, I think, earlier on at various meetings. And our existing guidelines basically say that a mortgage is generally required. So one of the things that happened after the board meeting, and that, again, it was my intention to come back and update the board on, is that we heard from the underwriter and the borrower that they believe at this point in time that they need to market the transaction with a mortgage. So I think it's an interesting example, and I think it really does demonstrate sort of what it is that we are looking to do here in terms of providing more certainty to the borrowers as they move through and work through our process. The process of issuing bonds, it takes time, and oftentimes, someone may make the decision that if the outcome is uncertain, maybe they don't want to go down that pathway. So I think that this process gives the borrowers more certainty. Again, I think it's not so dissimilar from what we've done in the past. And I think importantly, if things change, there is a mechanism by which we would come back to you either for things that need further action, or come back to you, in an informational sense, so that you are aware of anything that may have changed. Let's see. I think at this point, maybe I would just pause and ask for questions.
Portia, I think your chart that you included was very helpful.
Thank you.
You kind of broke it down in a way that corresponded with the way that we were thinking about it, and that helped me quite a bit. what was interesting to me about this process was that while it starts out as a discussion of our business and the market, it evolved into a discussion about who we are and how each member of the board, each member of the staff sees this organization. And when that began to emerge, that's where the conversation got more interesting. And I think that for a number of people, myself especially, it sort of brought to a head some of the more substantive things that we think about and talk about as a group. And it was a good process. It was a good discussion. I looked over the markup. I looked at all the materials. I think we arrived at the right place, and I think it's significant change. But it protects and we maintain our identity, and it's a good piece of work.
Shane. Thank you, John, and I appreciate your raising those elements because those two pieces, the Black Line staff report and the one DASNY chart, were sort of back further in the material.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you're pulling them all together in that way.
Well, I have to admit that Al said, check out Portia's report.
Because as you had noted, our hope was in putting, and at least having all the discrete pieces there, even though perhaps they weren't together in one package, but in having the discrete pieces there, we were hoping to basically, pull everything together in the sense that to the extent that we're looking to take a different approach as far as the financing guidelines are concerned for investment grade credits, at the same time, you have the draft Black Line staff report to give you a sense as to the information that you would be provided in connection with each of the financings. And really our intention there in terms of the changes that were made and that were blacklined was really to make really modest changes to the report, only in the areas where we felt that there was language that was either credit related or really opinion based. And so I think that on a going forward basis, if this is something that the board is comfortable with, it'll be that kind of discrete change in each of the reports, but obviously still providing the same kind of robust information that we have provided previously. And then also, John, as you had noted, the chart, and that was really something that I think that the entire board had requested, you and Sandra in particular, in terms of being quite clear about being able to see the things that really only affected the board, because obviously we had given you the full complement, 27 recommendations, many of which were really operational items away from the board, but really sort of distill it down to those things that impacted the board in some way, whether it be formal board action or whether it be just other items that we wanted to talk to you about, have the benefit of having that discussion and really sort of understanding your thinking as we were moving forward. Thank you.
May I? Well, let's first, are there other comments? I mean, does anybody want to talk about this directly before I offer a few comments?
I thank Portia and everybody for their efforts.
Of course.
It was a long process, Al, and clearly.
And not an easy one.
No.
A couple of things, Portia, just for this record. You point out that these guidelines in substance will give our clients considerably more certainty with regard to the outcome by eliminating the need to offer exceptions to the given rules. I think it's important to note, and it is to the credit of this board, that there has never been a financing presented to this board where an exception was requested and it was not approved.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that's in the record.
Yeah.
Secondly, and it's a question that was actually raised in the Finance Committee meeting yesterday, and I don't mean to sound flip, but we can't invite the market in for a meeting and ask it to describe current conditions. So what is it that we do? Give us a thumbnail sketch of what it is that we do to get the information to determine what the market conditions are. I mean, we're going to get information from the borrower. We're going to get information from the banks, from the underwriters. And we're going to collect information on our own, I assume. And those three things are what I think of when I. But, and again, for the record, and anybody else on staff can chime in to help do this, give us a sense of what it is that you're going to be looking to confirm then current market conditions.
So I think, for example, if we're looking at a transaction and the proposed security package does not include a mortgage for a particular transaction in a particular, rating, I think we would be seeking information as to other transactions that have been in the market, for the same type of institution, so a healthcare institution, whatever the rating is, without a mortgage, to see that is something that the market, and really what you mean there is that the investors, something that the investors are comfortable with. I think Gerard had some sort of more practical insights into that coming from that side of the business.
Yep.
Mine is sort of been somewhat, mine is very credit oriented.
Right.
But I think that's what we're looking for, and that's the kind of information that's really coming from the work that I think the underwriter and the borrower are doing together. And it's the underwriter really, honestly talking to their desk and also surveying the market in terms of other kinds of transactions, because at the end of the day, they've got to sell the bonds, and they can only sell the bonds if there's demand on the part of the investors.
Sure.
The advantage that we have in this space is that the municipal debt market is a very deep, liquid, broad market with hundreds of transactions on these particular credits. So we don't profess to have the greatest insight in a credit, but the investors, who are buying and selling, credits, are going to look at particular price points, number one, as well as how they price, and certainly the underwriters, how they're going to price, the security. And that's where the tension will exist in the market. And the market will determine, if you've got 100 of these transactions and 80 of them require more, then that's what it's going to be, And if they don't, it means that it's a fairly efficient market. So we're going to be in sync. The challenge that you always run into is when you think you know where the market is, and it's not, and so you have a pricing disadvantage.
Yeah.
And so that's really what clients are confounded with. They don't like that pricing disadvantage, in the sense of you're asking me, to have a mortgage when in fact there are credits in the market that are away from you, are priced differently, and they don't need to have that because that has a drag on their capital. That's all.
Well, and also it's very interesting the way you point out that the Montefiore transaction actually required more than our guidelines did, and that was in part driven by the investor, which is measured by the underwriter, because we have no insight into the investor but through the underwriter, right? They want to sell. And it would be interesting, from my perspective at least, to just get a sense, keep giving us that kind of information, because either one way or another, because it really does help us measure the marketplace and the appetite, and so that we're not behind the curve and just with the curve. Again, we don't want to be the drag on the investor or the client, But on the other hand, we want to be as close in tandem as we can to actual market conditions. But it was fascinating, actually, to find that out.
I have to say, Beryl, when the folks came back to us and gave us that update, I think as staff, that was our feeling as well. You know, sort of a very good confirmation in terms of the kind of process that we had envisioned. And I think that you made a good point. You know, I had indicated that if the security was lessened, we would come back for action. If the security was more, we would update you. But you make a good point that, you know, as we move into sort of this new way of doing things, it would probably be useful just to hear in general sort of the overall update.
Right.
So that, you know, it's a little bit closer for everyone, sort of that confirmation and, you know, the formal closing of the loop, which I can certainly do in my role.
Right. And we're not by any means holding back any, we're just sort of getting after the fact information.
Exactly.
In order to.
Yeah.
We're getting insights in terms of how the market is pricing risk.
Right, exactly.
That's really what it is.
Yeah.
And that's because the buyers are going to say, well, I believe, okay, that if there is no mortgage or no pledge of revenues, then the cost of capital, all right, for that particular credit is going to be much higher.
Right,
And
right.
that is a problem, okay, for issuers,
Right.
right? So then, okay, let me go get the security package, because if you're going to price me that way, and I think that works for us, right?
Exactly.
That works for us. So, as I said yesterday, this is like, you know, if you listen to Sean Puffy Combs, and he says, you know, higher, 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 that's what it's going to be, okay? That's just the way it's going to be. I think this is going to be an incredible opportunity for New York State in the tax-exempt space. We're not going to win everything, but we're going to reestablish our primacy, okay, and have the necessary risk infrastructure, efficiencies, and the transparency. So again, I'm not going to tell you that within 9 months, okay, we're going to see a windfall, but I can say that over the next extended period of time, there is a whole marketplace in terms of the BBB category and higher education and healthcare that we will have greater visibility into. They will have to look at us, as opposed to saying, well, you know, DASNY, I get what you're doing, but this is costing us too much money. The market will make those determinations. So I think we're going to be in a very great short-term inflection, and longer term, I think this is going to be very important. Plus, we've got the value add that no one else has in the marketplace. I mean, we've got a big team. I mean, look, this whole list reflects all of the contributions that everyone at DASNY has put in. Again, we are always talking about, we compete on value add. We're not competing on, you know, we're going to provide the lowest cost of capital. That's what the market does, but we're going to compete on value add, making sure that we bring together our finance, our construction business, our public finance, and our legal business. It's a lot of intellectual capital that I know has from us.
I will say, though, that your memorandum, which I thought was excellent, really, thank you, does suggest that we will see increased revenues, and we will hold you to that.
Listen, I'm a business person.
I know.
I'm a business person. You know,
I know.
And that's the whole genesis of this, right? So, you know, the first principle in the One DASNY initiative is grow our business, grow our revenue.
Okay.
That's-
I'm with you, 100%.
If I can ask, so this issue of predictability and certainty certainly resonates. How often have we seen that people went away because in the past, because of this question of they didn't know what kind of reception they were going to get when it came before the board? I mean, is it just something in the conversation, or do you know of instances where?
So I think the answer to that probably falls into 3 buckets. One are the clients who we start to work with, and then they said, you know what, we think we can go someplace else where we don't have to have these, certain elements of the security that are incorporated in your guidelines. So they didn't ask for an exception. They just said, you know what, we've now decided we'd rather go someplace else. So that's one category. I think there's another category, and we saw that most recently, in December, when we brought before the board for a resolution to proceed a number of healthcare transactions where the institutions were looking to exit the FHA program. In those instances, folks asked us the question, because our guidelines say for healthcare that a mortgage is generally required, they asked us that question. Well, what does that really mean? Do you think that we can move forward without one if the market doesn't require one? And the answer that we gave was, what you're saying to us makes sense. We understand that. We will bring that to our board. But we can never give any assurances,
Yeah.
And so sometimes folks stick with us and sometimes they don't. And then there's a category of probably the folks that we just never see at all because they look at it, they look at the guidelines, which are posted on our website, and they say, we don't quite seem to fit there cleanly. So, maybe we never get the call. So I think it kind of falls into those three spheres.
If I may, I think there's a fourth category.
Okay.
And the fourth category has happened on a few occasions that I'm aware of, where people have actually come to us, done transactions with us, and then complained bitterly to their peers about what they were required to provide in the way of security based on our guidelines.
But they still did the deal, though.
They didn't see it that way because it never got to the point of being a question of what does the market require, what are investors requiring, because our guidelines specify. And specifically that has to do with mortgages.
Yeah.
I would just comment from the Department of Health's perspective. We see, a significant amount of capital projects and financings come through us. And I just first, I want to also applaud the work of the team because I really believe this is the right direction for DASNY. But in terms of, I think it was the third bucket, Portia mentioned the folks that really never considered DASNY from the healthcare sector perspective, particularly in that BBB space. I think this opens up, a lot of opportunities. Yes, I just want to make that clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And when Portia and I went out and focused on the first iteration of the guideline change in 2015, we talked to a number of those healthcare institutions, and they were unequivocal in terms of, no, we're not coming to DASNY. And for these reasons. And if you think about this in the long term, we could consider this. And I think we've now created a very plausible opportunity for them to give consideration to us, or for us and themselves, because so many of them are rethinking their capital programs and are very active and very aggressive in the market. So I think this is a win-win situation for the state, for DASNY, and for our partners, and the people of the state.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there other questions or comments from board members? You have the resolution in front of you. And we have it's here. See, ready.
Mr. Chairman, just one comment for the record, and that's just that, we talked about the changes to investment grade financings. There are minor technical non-substantive changes to the private placement language. And again, you can see it in the black line, but again, technical non-substantive.
They're not substantive. I have reviewed them.
And you referring to the qualified institutional buyer?
There's no change there.
Yeah.
All right. There being no further discussion, no further questions, you have before you the resolution. May I have a motion, please, to approve it? Gerard, thank you very much. Is there a second? Thank you very much, John. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Are there any opposed, any abstentions? Then I want to congratulate everybody. The motion carries. The resolution is passed. I saved this comment for last because I think it's important to recognize people for doing the things that they do. Gerard has pointed out that this was a collaborative work. It could well be transformational for DASNY. It was not easy to get here, and that's because I think this is a very excellent board. Questions were raised that should have been raised. Two of our members are not here today who contributed substantially to the discussion around this, John Johnson and Sandra Shepard. And on the record, I want to thank them for the work that they did, though they could not be here. But finally, and importantly, I'm not sure that this process would have progressed as well as it did, but for the contributions of Portia Lee and her staff. Your leadership here really was very, very carefully done and very effective. And I want to say again for the record that the contributions you made probably made this work the way it has. And I want to thank you personally, and on behalf of the board, I want to thank you as well. Thank you. The next matter is.
May I read, because I think it's important, thank you, to reflect the comprehensiveness in terms of the inputs of many people at DASNY who remain unsaid and invisible, very visible to the process. So please bear with me. I just want to read these names very quickly. Obviously, we talk about Portia Lee, Andy Purcell, Matt Bergen, Ismet Kate, Gerard Klauser, Steve Kozier, David Ostrander, Craig Schriego, Kurt Schwab, Peter Ten Eck, Larry Volk, all from Public Finance. Kim Nadal, Maria Christek, Karma Seeds, Karen Sider, Laura St. James, Steve Winters-Bona, Nick Zarelli, all from Finance. Mike Cusack, Dina Amodio, Fred Clark, Debbie Drescher, Matt Moore, Donna Rosen, Ricardo Salomon, Cheryl Sargent, all from Council. Paul Koopman, Gail Katzman, Jamie Bullock, Dawn Langenbach, Robin Martinez, Robin Martinez, all from Construction. Deb Fasser, John Quinlan, Communications and Marketing, Mike Corrigan, Caroline Griffith, Dan Petroff, Executive Direction. This is, like I said, this is a very deep process. We've never gone this deep. We've gone very deep in this.
All right.
And I just want to commend all of the division heads, the MDs, in terms of mobilizing their resources, getting people invested, and I commend each and every individual in this process for putting ideas and holding nothing sacred. Really thinking through what is going to be in the best interest of this institution as we represent the interests across the state. So this was a well thought out, comprehensively engaged, exhaustive, combative process. We got there. So thank you very much.
And your leadership as a change agent clearly helped this to work. Thank you. There's a resolution entitled Roof Replacement and Repair.
It's not here.
Much more pedestrian matter. Our corporate headquarters in Albany is 20 years old. Our bylaws call for any contract for corporate purposes over $300,000 requires board approval. So we had did the roof on our building as well as the caulking of the external of the facade panels. It came in at 1.26 million. We'll also, subsequent to that, replace the solar panels. The entire project was estimated at 1.7 million, including the replace the solar panels. At this point,
What's up there? There's solar panels on the roof?
the solar panels we haven't bid yet. We're installing the roof and doing the exterior caulking. The old panels.
You have a maintenance contract on that roof? How old the roof is? 20 years old?
20 years old. Yeah. We had a warranty. It was starting to degrade. We looked at.
Do you have a maintenance contract on there?
We haven't with a contractor.
I mean to maintain it though, on like a
Yes.
yearly basis.
There was a solar array installed with the roof after it was installed. It's going to be integrated in this case. We looked at some replenishment.
Did you see a lot of benefits from the solar? Do you save a lot of money or not?
Yeah, we've done very well on it, but the useful life of the solar panels is just about there. The new technology is twice as productive. Our gear is obsolete as well. So
They got to coordinate. What Steve knows. They got to coordinate the new roof installation with the solar installation, so you don't blow the warranty on the solar.
Exactly.
The whole.
So and Steve,
I'm
is
sure.
overseeing the project as you would expect. So we're asking for approval of resolution to enter into the contract.
Are there any further questions from Mike?
It was bid out though, right? It was bid?
It was bid. We took expressions of interest, qualified 4 bidders from those expressions of interest. All 4 bid. This was the lowest.
Any other questions from Mike? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the resolution? Thank you very much, Wellington. Carol, thank you for the second. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Thank you all very much. The next order of business is Portia Lee's report, the Office of Public Financial Monitoring Management. Portia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm glad we're not paying you by the word. I mean,
I just asked that question. We're on the record.
yes.
I'll ask that later.
Behind tab 4 are the standard public finance reports. We priced and closed the municipal health facilities transaction since the last board meeting. Just a brief market update. Total new issue supply is about $174 billion year to date. That's down about 18% from the same time last year. This week, we're looking at a pretty heavy week of $9.1 billion in supply. There continues to be fears about global trade war, but there's still signs of strength in the U.S. economy that's helping investors remain optimistic. We saw last week another week of inflows into municipal bond funds. The 1, 10, and 30-year MMD have decreased since the last board meeting by 3, 5, and 4 basis points respectively. Just to give a sense, current MMD 1 year is 1.43, years 2.41, and 30 years 2.92.
Interesting, right?
Pardon me?
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And it's surprising. It continues to be surprising, notwithstanding.
Well, there was that right there. If you look at this over the last 10 years or so, they're always saying it's going, but it never goes.
Do you see the yield curve flattening as far as the yield on the MMD? Rather, I mean, I see the trend in the Treasury market, but do you see it flattening or not really?
It has been, but honestly, it changes. But
yeah, quickly for something that it's not really supposed to.
Yep. The other thing I wanted to do included.
Gerard asked why.
The world stage in general?
Probably. I guess in particular, investors may be wanting to stay short. right, in light of the uncertainty that's out there.
With no other with the U.S. economy being so strong and still being the safest place to invest, be it municipal or treasury, therefore suppressing the yield overall throughout the curve.
One other matter that we wanted to bring to the board's attention, we had sent to you in the supplemental mailing an update on the IAC transaction. As you'll recall, we brought that transaction to the board for adoption of documents in June. That transaction is about $14.5 million. Certain of the projects that are being financed include the acquisition of properties together with various renovation costs. We thought at the time of the last board meeting that all the projects were covered by PPAs. It's come to our attention that while the acquisition costs associated with certain projects are covered by PPAs, the renovation costs are not. The renovation costs amount to about $824,000. They may be approved for inclusion in the PPAs by such a mouthful of acronyms, OPWDD, at some point in the future, depending on their final review process. If those costs are covered, the PPAs will be amended at a later point in time. If these costs are not included, however, then the affected not-for-profits would basically be responsible for paying debt service on the costs associated with the renovations, and that would come from their revenues, which basically includes public funds. In any event, this issue will be disclosed in the POS so that investors are aware that these renovation costs are not included in the PPAs. So that was something different from what we had presented to you back in June, so we wanted to make sure to come back to you and give you that update.
Not a matter that requires board action, simply an update. Thank you. Are you?
That's it for my report.
We need to have a brief closed session. May I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss the financial and credit history of particular corporations and proposed pending or current litigation? Thank you very much. Is there a second? Thank you very much, Paul. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. As there are none opposed, we are in executive session. Ms. Kaler. Thank you. I think at this point, Gerard, you're going to introduce the construction projects report. Is that the way you want to do it? Great. Steve.
Have Steve go on.
Steve, you're on the agenda next.
Oh, alrighty. Behind tab 5 are the 3 standard construction division reports. On the cover of the construction projects report are photos of the New York State Oasis Residential Opioid Treatment Center. Oasis, the Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services. This project was located in Broome County at the Broome Developmental Center in Kimpton. Phase 1 of the project scope was to establish a residential opioid addiction treatment center, ATC, in vacant portions of the Broome Developmental Center to accommodate 50 clients in a residential chemical dependency withdrawal and stabilization program. Syracuse Behavioral Healthcare is the lieutenant. The scope included upgrades of finishes and hardware throughout 2 wings of the existing center to provide 50 detox beds for individuals combating addiction. In addition, the installation of a kitchen to serve up to 150 residents was delivered, along with major HVAC upgrades to support the kitchen stove. Construction of a nurses' station was also included, as were exterior site developments to accommodate 25 parking spaces and a new driveway to access the building. DASNY also provided FF&E services to outfit the resident rooms and the kitchen. The project budget was $1.5 million. This was a very fast-track project. We brought on Architectural Resources out of Buffalo as our design consultant. design started in August of 2017 and finished in September of 2017. Our contractor was Mattoon Construction Services. Construction started immediately thereafter in October of 2017, completed in April of 2018. This was quite the compressed schedule for a DASNY project of this size. And the facility was delivered for an April 1, 2018 opening. On page 3, just highlight a new project at Hunter College, a large mechanical project, $24 million. On page 9, under construction expenditures, May 2017 fiscal year to date, the number was $132 million. This year, May 2018 fiscal year to date, $109 million, so we are down $23 million in expenditures year to date through May. As far as projects and programs, CODA, we're coming to the finish line here. We had an elevator inspection on 7/9 that passed. We had the FDNY come in on 6/24. They issued a letter of defect. The items in that letter of defect are being addressed. We're refiling our drawings associated with changes included in the letter of defect, and we will schedule reinspection within the next week or two. Building 1 has been final cleaned. For occupancy, Building 2 finishes and commissioning continues. Site work is completing, and we are now targeting a TCO for later this month or early August for occupancy of the facility, Buildings 1 and 2 in September. South Beach Psych Center, building enclosure continues with like gauge metal framing and brick masonry work progressing. The MEP roughing continues on all floors. We're performing a second window impact test off-site today, actually, for an installation detail proposed by the general contractor. The project is 64 days behind schedule. However, the team is looking for ways to close that gap. The baseline completion date is June 2019. On the SUNY front, 29 of the 30 SUNY summer projects are on track for completion. There's one outlier at Buffalo State that's behind schedule that we're working to correct. The 4 capital projects are on track for the fall 2018 occupancy at Plattsburgh, SUNY Canton, Buffalo State, and Brockport. We're in the final third of the summer construction calendar with all TAOs required in about 30 days. I recently completed a number of site visits to 8 of the campuses up north and out west. Needless to say, they're very busy on all fronts from a construction perspective. NYCHA, on the security side, 47 of the 77 projects are now complete. 22 are in construction, 6 are in procurement, and 2 are in design. On the appliance side, 29 of 33 developments have been completed. And on the quality of life side, 17 projects are in construction. These are exterior projects. That's out of the 26 exterior projects that we're undertaking. On the FIT front, our C² project is moving toward a bid advertisement date as 100% construction documents are incorporating our final comments, looking for a possible 7/31 advertisement date for the project. This is a $189 million project that is going to be quite challenging from all perspectives. And lastly, on the Life Sciences Lab for DOH, the RFQ, as Gerard noted, was released earlier in July. We held an RFQ pre-submission conference yesterday. It was well attended by many familiar firms representing the design and construction industry. RFQ responses are due to DASNY on August 8th. And I'll just close by saying we're chasing a lot of work on the SUNY and CUNY front right now. Oswego is talking about renovations to Fennell Hall. Cortland is looking at a very large renovation to their 2 towers, Smith and Casey, along with a new addition tying those 2 towers together. Mooresville is looking to renovate Stewart Hall. This is a function of their recent residence hall master plan. that came together. And Fredonia is moving on using DASNY to perform a residence hall master plan, which will kind of guide them into the future as far as what they're going to do with their residence hall stock. Lastly, we had a meeting with CUNY this week. We are in competition with NYPA to deliver a new boiler plant for them. So we went into sales mode and talked up what we could do for them on that project. That concludes my report.
Steve, thank you. Are there questions for Steve? Comments about the work? 29 out of 30 of the city projects are on schedule. That's terrific that you're able to do that.
Yeah, it's 30 out of 30.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. We should all be so lucky.
The project that's not on track is a bathroom job, and we need bathrooms for the residence hall to be
Yeah,
occupied.
of course.
So
Of course.
we're focused on 1 out of 30 right now.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Kim, are you going to supplement your report?
Yes, thank you, Al. I just wanted to bring out a couple of the highlights of the report. We are continuing to be above average or above the budgeted level on our direct charges for public clients. That's at 94% versus our budget at 92%. We did not have any client financing closings in the month of June. We do have 4 year-to-date, and a little over 40% of our revenue budgeted for the year we have taken in through those 4. As Gerard noted earlier, we are slightly below budget overall on our operating expenditures. We had some minor disbursements out of the Reserve for Replacement Fund. On the other funds that the board established in the summer of 2016, we have $5.2 million of uncommitted in the Healthcare Transformation Fund, $2.4 million uncommitted in the Evolutionary Fund. That's from an initial balance of $4 million, and $500,000 of uncommitted funds for the 21st Century Technology Fund, and that started at $3 million. Any questions?
No questions? Then, Mike, the general counsel's report. You've already reported on several things, but
Yes, I have. I'd like to defer my time to you, Al. And thank you for recognizing our team, Debbie and Ricardo, who worked very close with me on the tail end of this, and the folks that you're listed on the front end of this project. It was very much a team effort. Thank you.
and a successful team. Thank you. I have 2 things. One is to read to you all a portion of what I'm going to call a resolution in progress. Normally, you would have a Deb Drescher resolution, but this is all happening so quickly that it is a subject of a lot of drafting still. And I thought I would read to you some of what I'm pretty sure will end up in that resolution, since she is here and will not be here at the next meeting, which is in September. Whereas Deborah Polinsky Drescher joined DASNY on October 24th, 1988 as an assistant counsel 2 in DASNY's Office of General Counsel. And whereas in nearly 30 years of service to DASNY, Ms. Drescher held 6 positions, each of increasing responsibility, and has served since 2005 as managing general counsel. And whereas in her many and distinguished years of service, Ms. Drescher served under 9 of the 11 executive directors and presidents in DASNY's 74-year history. Whereas, throughout her tenure, Ms. Drescher's role expanded to include increasing oversight of DASNY's corporate responsibilities, internal controls, legislative matters, and labor relations. Whereas, Ms. Drescher was let's go to the next one. Whereas in the late 1990s, Ms. Drescher was responsible for establishing the initial legal and process framework for numerous New York State capital grant programs administered by DASNY, and has since provided legal counsel to DASNY staff and stakeholders throughout the 20 years of growth in these programs. And whereas Ms. Drescher has provided invaluable legal advice with respect to the issuance of over $128.4 billion of DASNY bonds and more than $23 billion of construction expenditures on behalf of our clients. And whereas in May of 1995, Ms. Drescher was appointed as Assistant Secretary to DASNY, and in 1997 began her role as liaison to DASNY's board. And then now, therefore, be it resolved. I think, Debbie, you've already heard this board in a closed session express its appreciation for the work that you've done. You have been the contact person on what people call the corporate stuff, which offended me when I was in a role like that, and they called it the corporate stuff. But you've been the point person on that for certainly the entire time I've been here, and I want to say thank you for that. It's a simple thank you, and doesn't in any way get at the enormity of the work I knew that you were doing when you were doing it. I mean, you can't say more than thank you for a job well done, but there ought to be better words, and I don't have them. It's been a pleasure to be able to pick up the telephone and call you up and say, I don't understand this, and writing policies, rewriting policies, the kind of work that if you do it all correctly, if everything you do is done well, nobody knows you're alive. Get one thing wrong, and boy, are you in the bucket. Been there, done that. It has been a pleasure to have the kind of collegial relationship that we have had. And I want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to me when you knew that I didn't know what I was talking about. That's been a real pleasure. And having said that, I wish you all the best. If there's anything that we can ever do for you, please let us know.
Thank you, Alan. I just would like to say a few things too. I don't know where these 30 years went, but during most of my tenure, I always felt like I had the best job in the world. I felt very fortunate to have worked with so many wonderful people that had high professional standards and high personal standards. And I've been lucky enough to work on complex, interesting transactions that were intellectually stimulating and allowed me to build a lot of lifelong friendships along the way. However, having said all that, the greatest privilege that I have had in working at DASNY, and I do mean privilege, is working with this board for the last 22 years. Your intellect, your policy sense, your high standards, your professionalism, they're matched by no one else. And I really feel fortunate to have been a part of that and had the ability to work with you all. And I also thank you for your support too, because you've been very supportive to me over the years, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My last comment before we close this meeting is that I want to congratulate this board for all of the time and effort that you put into a successful vote today, the approval of the revised financing guidelines. This is a very powerful group of men and women. It's dealing with people who have concern for the organization and the intellect to back it up that makes this job a pleasure for me. Don't hesitate to call me when there are questions on the table, and so I get a lot of phone calls, and that's a pleasure. And when I don't hear from you, I call you. And as you all will recall, in the last 2 years, we've talked a great deal about the work that led to where we are today. Individually, since under the rules we're not allowed to meet, except on the public record. This is an enormous piece of work, and it speaks well of who we are and where we think we're going. But for your investment time and energy, we would not be here today. And so I think you each deserve a round of applause for the effort that you put into this. We're not going to do that, John. but thank you all very much for the work that you've done and for today's successful result. That's all I had. May I have a motion, please, to adjourn?
Thank you, Al, for your leadership.
Who moved? Thank you, Darryl. Is there a second? Thank you, Troy. All in favor, please indicate by aye. Aye. We are adjourned.